Hello everyone and welcome back to the Diaries of Space Explorers with me, your host, Gavin Tolometti. Now I'm quite excited for this episode because it's our first guest with a background in the field of life sciences and medicine. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Michael Gallagher, who practices family and dive medicine at the Canadian Forces Base in Esquimalt, British Columbia. Michael is the president and CEO of Association of Spaceflight Professionals, an organization developing early-stage human-in-the-loop space experiments and technologies. Michael is also a strong believer in bringing opportunities to students to be able to learn more about space flights and what technology can help improve the efficiency of astronauts while in low Earth orbit. So without further ado, let's get right into the episode. The medical background getting into space exploration and and wondering what it is that brought you into this field. So do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about what it is that brought you from medicine into space?
Well, totally. I mean, and I think when you kind of look at my journey, it's very, I mean, it's probably very similar to a lot of other people's journeys. I mean, I'd had a big interest in space when I was a kid, and then kind of looking at just our ability to do things that are space related in Canada and all that sort of thing. I thought, well, it's there, but the chances of me being able to be involved in that in a meaningful way are pretty small. And then, there was one time when I was in Queen's undergraduate where I applied for, I was in life sciences and applied for their space life sciences program, didn't get that. And then in medical school, we got a letter from our dean, and it said, Canadian Space Agency is looking for 3 Canadians to do aerospace medicine electives at Kennedy Space Center, Johnson Space Center, and University of Texas Medical Branch doing their short course. And I kind of thought, well, sure, I'll give it another shot and see if it works. I mean, there's certain things in life you do and everything. And then ended up getting it, and then went down and spent some time at Kennedy Space Center for a month, and it was just phenomenal and kind of mind blowing. And I just thought, wow, I'd like this to be a bit more part of my life if I can, for lack of a better word. And so I kind of then started to say, well, how do I get more involved in this a little bit? And so what I did was I've been to various different aerospace conferences, and then I ran into a group that was trying to see if they could, in the commercial space sector with some really interesting things going on. They were going to try and see if they could maybe, with Virgin Galactic starting to fly and everything, maybe see if they could be payload specialists for these various different space companies and that sort of a thing. And so payload specialist really flies an experiment in space and whatnot. And so I've kind of been chipping away at that. Now, I mean, my day job is as a family doctor. I currently work at the Canadian Forces Base in Esquimalt, but I also do some work in rural communities, and so but space, I mean, is kind of very similar to rural communities as well. I mean, you're in a very kind of remote and extreme environment and that sort of a thing. And also, when you look at military medicine, I mean, you've got some similarities too with kind of being in a more dangerous environment and that sort of thing. So I thought, okay, well, let's see if we can make these things work together. So.
Yeah, no, that's actually very fascinating. And it's so cool to hear that you got the opportunity to go down to, you said Kennedy Space Flight Center, where you got to participate in some research down there.
Yeah.
And so when you heard about this opportunity, you applied and you got it. Mm-hmm. And then when you went down there, what was that experience like? I mean, it was a world that you knew about, but you were still very new to, because you were so used to the life sciences and the field of medicine. Did you find the transition very scary or quite eye-opening?
Well, I think eye-opening and just a whole lot of just fun and awesome. I mean, I as an example, when I was going down there, I thought, okay, there's not going to be any shuttle launches. They're kind of winding down the shuttle program. But I thought, it'll still be fun to see how everything operates and to kind of be in that world a bit. And then what they said was, well, hey, do you want to come in? We know you're going to come in on Monday at 8 a.m. for your lecture. Do you mind coming in at 12 a.m.? There's a space shuttle launch that's going to happen kind of in the early morning, and you can be part of that if you want. I was like, of course I want to. Of course I'll come in at 12 a.m. to do a space to be part of space shuttle launch and everything. And so you kind of get your flight suit measured out and everything like that, and then you're kind of just hanging out with a lot of the medical triage forces before the space shuttle takes off and everything. And so it really just started with a bang, and it was and that I think set the stage for just really absorbing so much of what was going on there. And it was such a time where you had Space Shuttle Discovery that had launched. Space Shuttle Atlantis had just got rolled out to the pad and everything, and so just seeing the activity there and just seeing kind of this place where history's been made so many times, and it was just phenomenal. So.
And when you got to see that space shuttle launch, I mean, I have to say I'm quite jealous because it's one of the few things I wish I could have seen when I was very young. But unfortunately now, since the space shuttle program's gone, can't really hold that dream anymore. But maybe one day I get to see a rocket launch of any kind. I'd love to see one. Did you get to, when you saw the astronauts getting fitted and you got to see all that behind the scenes, did you get to see any of the routine medical checks that they have to do before they board the shuttle?
Well, what's interesting? We actually weren't in where they were getting fitted and everything. We were a bit farther away from the shuttle, and so we were around in case anything bad happened. Where just after takeoff and everything. So that was kind of our role there. But certainly, what we did get to see, and it was really exciting, was just the astronauts all coming out of a building, and then just being taken over to the shuttle and everything. And so it was just neat to kind of see the energy and just hear some of the chatter going on. And that was a lot of fun. And just, again, as there are kind of times where you're very, where it's okay, the space shuttle is about to take off and everything like that. And you're kind of, everyone's watching and seeing what's going on. And then there are other moments where it's just kind of dead time for a little bit, so you're just getting to know the people around you and cracking jokes and all that sort of thing. So
you must have been able to make so many good connections getting to talk with all these people behind the scenes of the launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh no. I mean, it's really neat to see. There were a lot of different people there. There was, Tom Hoffman, who worked as a flight surgeon for a while, was there, and he was kind of driving us up to the place where we were kind of just hanging out with the rest of the medical triage forces. I mean, there's Kathy DiBiase, who's one of the nurses who works, who kind of sees the astronauts post flight and everything like that, and just takes care of them and makes sure they're doing really well. And yeah, I mean, it was really, it was an incredible moment. And then doing, one of the people though I think I remember the most, and this was kind of post launch, was a fellow by the name of Barry Slack, and his dad was an Apollo engineer, and he just showed us around everywhere. He said, "Hey, you want to come see what's going on with the shuttle today?" So he took us over to Atlantis, where it was just on the launch pad, and so we kind of went up and saw a few things around. But I think what was really, probably what was some of the most interesting kind of conversation I had with Barry, and kind of informing that connection was just hearing a little bit about not only what was happening when things went well, but just what would happen when maybe something went wrong. When something did go wrong with Apollo 13, when the astronauts were in real peril. And he said, as a kid, being in that situation, and my dad's working at NASA, and you got a lot of other engineers' kids are in the school. There's kind of a quietness that's over the classroom, and people are lighting vigils at night, candlelight vigils to pray for the safe return of the astronauts. I mean, there's really I think it's just really a fascinating dynamic that you kind of we realize we see kind of one slice of the space program kind of as lay people, and then you kind of look at the whole. I guess the whole kind of aspect of what goes on underneath it, and you're like, okay, yeah, well, this is a big effort. There are a lot of people, and people have families, and families react different ways, and when things go wrong, there's a way that community reacts and tries to build resilience and come together. So
yeah, it's always that we get reminded that with space exploration, there's always those great risks that come with all of these achievements that the space agencies and all these companies now try to reach. And getting to see that behind the scenes at a shuttle launch, looking at all the risks for engineers, risks for the astronauts themselves, like not just the medical risks, but also some of the logistical risks that could have happened before and during the launch. I mean, you got to see this firsthand, or at least you got explained but in person at the site, like this is what we do if things went horribly wrong, like the worst case scenario. So, and getting exposed to that quite early on for you, that must have been something that you were able to take back with you, I guess, to Canada.
Yeah, well, and I think the biggest thing that taking some of the lessons learned back to Canada, and also looking and saying, okay, well, for future space exploration, what lessons in various communities in Canada can be brought to the space program? I mean, I think it really is some of our rural and northern communities, and just that these are. When you look at space, I mean, space is, and one person at NASA put it to me, is space is long, slow, dangerous, and hard. When you're looking at, say, how much money you have to invest in it, the time you have to put in to really get things right, and just the level of difficulty to make things go off without a hitch is just it's kind of mind blowing a bit. And so, but then you kind of look also and say, okay, well, you've got astronauts living in this confined space and this really austere environment and everything. And you think of some of our rural communities and some of the folks who live and work every day in these tiny, far-flung communities up north, in some cases, some very harsh weather, often, very much like space, longer transport times to kind of get from the place where they live to a place that can care for them in a like a big tertiary hospital or something like that, where they can get a bit more care and everything. I mean, it's very similar. You're kind of, some of these folks, live in kind of a similar manner to what various things astronauts face. And so looking and saying, okay, well, what do we do in those settings with limited resources? And how do we do that successfully, and what do and saying, okay, well, how do we take that and apply it to space? I mean, I think those are the key things when you say, okay, well, what do we take from the space program? What do we take from the space program back to Canada? We kind of say, okay, well, there are a lot of there are a lot of things that you have to do with limited resources, especially you can't put a lot of things up into space that are heavy, so you have to always consider weight. And so you kind of say, okay, what do you do in that setting with doing more with less in space, and what do you do in rural communities, and how can you take some of the lessons in rural communities and say, well, we can probably do that in space, and make sure that somebody gets home safe and everything. So.
Yeah, it's always incredible to know that what we learn from space launches and missions, we can apply them to try and help people in, as you said, in rural or more isolated communities, to how we can take less but bring more in that kind of sense. And then vice versa, where if we have similar situations on Earth, we can apply those same ideas and strategies for trying to reduce weight and make spaceflight a little bit safer, but still be able to take everything that astronauts will need for their mission. So, and it's something I think that's not really talked about much, or when it does, it comes off very, not very often, and a lot of people forget that we learn from the challenges of space exploration, and we also see similar situations on Earth. So we try to apply the same solutions to what we have on Earth, and it could also work the other way around. It's how we're able to develop so much in space exploration, whether not just in the engineering front, but also in the medical and logistical front. So I think it's so awesome that you got to personally see this and then be able to apply it when you return to Canada.
Yeah, well, it's been it's certainly been an amazing opportunity, and I'm amazed that I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, and I sure hope that there are more opportunities we can create for more people to be able to experience that, and just see what's possible. So.
Yeah, I do hope that the Canadian Space Agency and other space agencies such as NASA and the European Space Agency can offer these types of opportunities for people who are not in the hardcore sciences or engineers to be able to see what space can really offer everyone. And it can really help broaden everyone's understanding of why this all happens. And I wanted to quickly jump back to, because when you returned to Canada, you stuck with the field of medicine even after you got delved into the field of space, because medicine was something you really were connecting with, but you also wanted to keep space with you. So I have like two parts of a question here. I hope you don't mind. One would be, like, since you stuck with the medical field and that's where you came from originally, if you were to meet a student who maybe was in a similar situation, they were in the life sciences, but they went to med school, but they had a very strong passion for space and wanted to get involved, what would you maybe tell them to? What advice would you give them to move forward with this passion of theirs? And another one is, when you brought the experience working at the Kennedy Space Center back with you, what was the first thing that you did to apply it when you realized space is something I want to stay involved in?
Totally, yeah. So I think the big thing I would say to somebody who was getting involved in space, especially from Canada, I think there are kind of two pathways that you can go. You can do your best to try and get a job in space, but with the commercial space sector and with that really key thing that they always mention in space, which is, well, if you want to do something in space, make sure it's relevant back on Earth, is saying, okay, well, maybe try and create your own job in space in some way, with a commercial space sector kind of burgeoning. See, if you don't quite get into a space job right away, you're going to be connected. A lot of people in space say, well, it seems like, I'd like to see more people interested in space. I'd like to see more people see how important this work is. And so I think that person who maybe isn't in space, who has a day job on Earth, can say, well, I like space, and I think that these parts of my job on Earth really are relevant to space, or these things in space are really relevant to improving the work I do in my day job on Earth. So I think that's one thing that I would say. Now, that leads in a little bit to, okay, well, what have I tried to do? Because, yeah, I mean, I don't have a formal job in space right now. But what I have tried to do is tried to see if I can create my own job in space and try and create jobs for others. So, I mean, I am head of a nonprofit organization called Association of Spaceflight Professionals in the US. And so what we're really trying to do is, that was kind of the new name of the company that I'd kind of been connected with after I was involved at Kennedy Space Center. And I thought, okay, well, let's still try and keep with that job of keep with that role of trying to say, okay, well, how do we start to get more people connected into this industry and actually one day flying in space? And part of that is saying, well, can we design experiments and develop technologies that require a human to fly and are going to create benefits not only for space exploration but also for what we do on Earth. And so that's kind of been the way I've tried to stick with it, and how I've tried to see if I can create additional opportunities for folks to be able to be connected to space where they wouldn't otherwise. And so, as an example, we've been working with the University of Toronto to see if students can design and build something called the lower body negative pressure sleeping bag. It's something that when astronauts go to space, fluid shifts to their head. That causes all sorts of problems. So lower body negative pressure causes fluid to shift to the legs. And one thing it's been used for with the Russians a while back is basically, astronauts, when they come back to Earth, faint. And so the Russians use this technology to try and stop that from happening. So I kind of said to the University of Toronto students, well, hey, let's see if we can build something better. The old ones are kind of a bit bulky and smelly. Why can't we try and figure out how to build a device that maybe is better? And we talked to the fellow by the name of George Pantelos down at the University of Louisville. He'd been working on a lower body negative pressure sleeping bag. So I'm hoping that, through that one piece of technology, that helps start to get more engineering students at least working on space projects. And I hope that as we develop that farther, that hopefully starts to create opportunities for people to actually be able to test that piece of technology. Another earlier stage one that we were kind of coming up with is something called an auto transfusion device. They exist in emergency departments and a lot more in Canada in operating rooms and that sort of thing. And they kind of take blood that's been that a patient has lost and then retransfuse it back into their body. And certainly in space, bringing your own blood with you is a bit of a problem in terms of it would be a problem to kind of take blood for a long duration mission, because you have to blood starts to expire at a certain point in time. You have to draw more blood. So if you can make that device smaller, maybe you can actually have that sort of a device on a spacecraft. But also, when I'm working in rural emergency departments in Canada, one thing is some of them don't have blood, some of them have very little blood. So if you get a trauma patient and you need blood, you often have to call a bigger hospital to say, hey, I need blood right now. So if you can also use that piece of technology to be able to have in a rural emergency department, that might be able to help save patients' lives as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do to stay connected. And one of our student teams from the University of Toronto presented a poster at the NASA Human Research Program Investigators Workshop this year, which is really great. They did a really great job of that. So.
No, I have to say, your nonprofit and the opportunities that you've given students sounds above beyond incredible. Getting to work with all these projects to try and improve technology for space exploration. And I love that you were giving the example that the equipment that you were designing to help bring some blood with you up into space for astronauts in case they need it, and then you were able to find a way to apply it back to helping people on Earth in rural or distant communities that probably don't have access to major blood supplies that, as you said, city or larger hospitals would have access to. It just reminds me that how much spin-off technology is so useful and how space has actually been helping us where people don't really realize it. And it's so cool that you get to show these students that, yes, you are designing something that's going to help astronauts or a piece of spacecraft up in space orbiting our planet. But at the end though, is that you're going to be probably designing something that we can take back with us and maybe help someone back here on Earth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and that I think has been, when you look at space, because it's such a hard thing to do, and because it brings a lot of amazingly smart people from lots of different backgrounds together to really do something hard. I think from that, it's no wonder that you've had so many spin-offs from space in the past, and I think why it still has a lot of potential going forward. And I think that kind of gets to why why does space remain interesting, and why is it still so important for us to engage with that? And I mean, I think you really have to go to new places to learn new things, and space is about one of the most novel places that you can go. I mean, and something that, to get a little geeky and technical with medicine, I mean, it's just, it puts a whole new perspective on just, what makes patients healthy and what makes them sick. I mean, one thing we tell patients so much, so, okay, well, eat a good diet and exercise well. And one thing I would probably add to that is, okay, well, you need diet, you need exercise, and you need gravity. I mean, gravity is so important for health, and it's a real reflection of why exercise is so important. Because when you go to space and you start to, your bones start to thin out, your heart starts to kind of get a little smaller. You're getting kidney stones because you're getting, or you can get kidney stones, I should say. Not everyone gets kidney stones, but you have a higher risk of kidney stones because you get that calcium coming out into your bloodstream a bit. Your vision changes because part of, you mentioned that fluid shift and everything like that. They're still not entirely sure about whether the fluid shift's causing it or something else, but it's a thought that maybe that's causing some of the changes in the vision that are happening in astronauts and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, space is, and when you get back to Earth, you have a lot of trouble figuring out which way is up. So that just leads us to really say, wow, we're really, there's a lot that we're really adapted to here on Earth. There's so, this planet kind of fits us to a T, and when we're taken off planet, a lot of weird things happen to us, and geez, you also kind of see why. Well, if you kind of sit on your couch for days on end, you seem, or you're in a job where you sit and you don't get up and move around a lot. I mean, space really throws that into sharp relief as to why that can be so bad for you. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. There are days where I've been sitting in front of my laptop working and I don't feel the greatest. And it's probably because I remind myself, you have been here for 5 hours straight. You probably should at least walk to the kitchen and do something just to get the blood moving in your body. Because I know work is work, but this is probably not the healthiest thing to do right now.
I think a lot of us are definitely. I think we'll give everyone a pass for a little bit. I think
yeah,
give people a bit of a pass.
Yeah, considering the situation the world's in right now, it's not uncommon to hear someone sitting around a lot more than they used to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your opportunities that you said you work with students get to work on these projects, is it only open to University of Toronto students?
Well, no, and I think, I mean, our organization is a membership-based organization, so anyone could come in and join. It's www.spaceflightprofessionals.org, and so yeah. I mean, I think that's something we're trying to kind of do a little bit more and figure out, is to say, okay, it's really, it's been part of this capstone course with the University of Toronto, where it's been mostly the engineering students involved, but I think our key, the key thing we'd like to figure out how to do a bit more is to get more of our members involved in designing some of these projects and that sort of a thing. And so yeah, I would say absolutely it's open for folks who want to join, and if they have an interest in that, if they're saying, yeah, hey, I'd like to help work on some AutoCAD designs, or geez, I've got, I could probably 3D print some stuff, or some of these things. Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. So yeah.
And I'm guessing it's also open to students who are not in engineering programs. It could also be anyone who's maybe got a different background but has a strong interest in one of the projects that your organization is working on.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think this is one of the other things is, I mean, space truly needs everybody. I mean, you look at, again, as there are, it's definitely highly weighted towards an engineering component, simply because people are designing rockets. But really, I mean, you're looking also and saying, okay, well, other difficult problems are, well, how are we going to finance this? How are we going to keep how are we going to get funding for this? How does that feed back into the business world? Those are business students who need to help solve those problems. I mean, you look actually, I mean, very interestingly, I mean, one very interesting fellow I talked with at the Next Generation Suborbital Researchers Conference, I had some great conversations with, is an insurance person, and you're kind of saying, okay, well, with space being dangerous and hard and that sort of a thing, if there are things that go wrong, well, how does that work out? How do you bear that risk? What does that look like? So you need folks from the insurance industry to be part of this. If you're looking and saying, well, how do you tell that story to other people? I mean, there are a lot of times where I think, and I know this certainly for myself, I mean, I know some of the words that are talked about in advertising or the arts, know your audience, or figure out ways to connect with people, and connect with their stories. But really, I mean, and it's one of those things where I think you really have to develop an expertise. You really have to be on the ground doing some of those things. So if there are folks who have worked on advertising campaigns, who have worked in the art world, creating various different things that move people emotionally. I mean, that's crucial. I certainly could not claim to have expertise or talent in those areas, and those talents are very much needed if we're all going to take the next step and do more in space. So
yeah, it's never an individual's job when it comes to space. It can't all just be all scientists, or it can't all be engineers. We need everyone to help each other, or else we're never going to be able to advance forward. We're going to be stuck in just one spot in development and initiation, that we're just going to be, I guess, stagnant. We're not going to be able to progress in anything. And it's the same with any field. I mean, field of medicine needs not just doctors, but they need nurses, they need engineers to be able to build equipment, they need scientists to do certain research. And I think this is just something that we all have to realize, that we need each other's skills, and we can't just rely on the skill base of one group of people with only one field, because it's never going to be able to move forward in that case.
Yeah, well, and some of my favorite, I mean, when I was working at the University of Alberta, I mean, they have some very they have some very wonderful art exhibits that are in certain parts of the hospital, and also some poetry in one part of the hospital that I know, working as a med student there, I mean, I would go by a lot, and we talk in medicine very much about okay, well, you're not just focused on the disease with a patient, you're focused on the illness experience that a patient is having. And we, in medicine, we often are looking at, okay, how do we diagnose a problem? How do we fix a problem? But there's a whole person under there. And I think what's nice, I think, in medicine now is, I think we've gotten to the point where we're saying, okay, we recognize this thing called the illness experience. We recognize that there's a person under there, but now what we really need, I think, from artists and from folks in from folks and other folks in that field who. Poets, writers who really deal a lot with saying, well, a main part of our job in the art world is to help you, to really feel what another person would feel, or be in somebody else's shoes. I think that's where there's a real need now, to have artists say, okay, well, you doctors seem to now recognize that there's this thing called the illness experience, and that there's a patient behind the illness. But now it's time to take that a step further. Now it's time for you to really understand more about what that means beyond what you already do. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's there's still I hope I'm not going on too long, but there's this one thing that they teach us in medical school about, well, how do you connect with the whole person? And in medicine, we have a lot of acronyms, and one of them is called FIFE. And so you kind of say, okay, we'll talk about a patient's feelings, ideas, function, and experience. But if you just go through it as a checklist, in a very mechanical way, there are times where it doesn't work. Well, how does your broken leg make you feel? Might be one thing, and so you're like, medicine, and lots of different people are needed in space.
Sorry, Mike. I got cut off at one point.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's when you said the story about the broken leg, and then that's when it cut.
Fair enough. No, that's all right. So you kind of say, well, of course, I've broken my leg. You should know how I feel. Aren't you a human being with feelings and emotions like me? So that, I think, is where we take things a little farther. And I think when we look at space, it's kind of an example of okay, well, we recognize that there's space is about more than science. Everyone talks about STEAM and science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics and everything. But to kind of say, okay, so we've got to that point where, yes, there's an art world out there, and there's something about that. But geez, if you want to kind of turbocharge this again and really connect people with space, we need to go that step farther. And that's where I think we need current people in the art world to then say, all right, well, let's, how do you take that up a notch? How do you take that to the next level? That our current understanding of art in the space world and how we connect with people, and take that up a notch and get people interested in it again. So.
No, I completely agree. I think the space and sciences in general do need more people in the arts field to come in, because they're much better at making things that are very interesting, but also can be very complicated, relatable and understandable to everyone outside of the field. Mm-hmm. And as amazing as the sciences are, I think a lot of us to this day still struggle to realize that we can't talk the same way to everyone else that we probably talk to our colleagues, because to them that's a different language that we're speaking in a way. Mm-hmm. we can't express it the same way as someone who maybe is an artist, as you said, artists and poets. They know how to express information and stories to people. And I think if we bring more of them in, we may see more of an understanding of the reason we go into space, the reason we put all this money into space that does come back into the economy. It's not flushed down the toilet, to say, and all these cool technologies that we can get from space, and the skills that young careers and people and students gain from space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and on that subject of communication and getting people interested in space, I mean, somebody expressed it to me far better than I could have expressed it to myself, or I could have expressed it myself, and I think it rang true, because I felt that way too for a while. As she said to me, well, I've always found space, I found space really interesting. I found it really, really fun. And then I realized, I'm born in the UK. I was born with folks who are, parents middle class, that sort of a thing. And then I learned that, yes, this is really cool, but people like me don't do stuff like that. And that I thought, okay, wow, that's revelatory. And that's one of those things where you kind of look and say, not only to people, well, of course you can do stuff like that, but start to say, okay, well, let's pick that apart there. Why do you think people like you can't do stuff like that? Are there areas where you're more talented than you think you are? And wow, if you actually use that talent here, I bet you could do a heck of a lot more than you think you could. And I bet you could do stuff like that if you if you did this.
No, I agree. I think it's something that everyone needs to think about when they start to wonder whether or not they can achieve certain things. So I think that's a really good thing for people to take away from this. So Michael, I want to get into one of the favorite parts of my podcast, which is the questions I ask all the guests. And the first question: if you wanted a future mission to go to any celestial body in our solar system, where would it go?
Oh, it's in our solar system.
You know what? If you could make a case for it being outside of our solar system.
Okay. Well, I'll let me see. I will give two answers to that. And one of them comes to, so I did this program called the Space Studies Program at International Space University, and my roommate Daniel Long, he gave a very, very good presentation on a certain planetary body that he was feeling that, everyone's focusing on Mars, but he said, I think this planetary body is a lot better to go to and more interesting, and it was Venus. And so he made a really interesting case to kind of say, well, there's this really fascinating little layer in Venus where it's actually fairly habitable within a certain layer of atmosphere and that sort of thing. And so that could be a fascinating place to explore. And if you're looking at the surface of the planet, it's just so it's so hostile that you're probably getting so many different compounds and weird things that are created on the surface that would be really important to explore. So I'll give you Venus for I'll say Dan Long, you've convinced me, and I agree we should explore Venus. And then I'll just be I'll be boring and say, if we're going outside the solar system, probably Proxima Centauri. I'd be fine if we decided to kind of do a bit more on the Oort cloud and figured out, okay, well, what's this sheath protecting us from a whole bunch of other galactic cosmic radiation that could really do us a whole lot of harm. I would settle for the Oort cloud, but no, there's something about the nearest star. It's boring, but there's something about the nearest star that's interesting. So sure, let's do that.
If any astrophysicists or astronomers are listening, they might not find it that boring of an answer. And I think you're the first one to mention Venus as a target. So, and it's very good to know that there are two missions that have been proposed to go to Venus. I think it won't be till this summer until we find out whether one of them, both, or fingers crossed, none of them get to go. It's one from NASA and called I might get the acronym wrong. I think it's Veritas, and then ESA is Envision. So maybe fingers crossed one of those missions gets to go to Venus, because there's still a lot that we don't know about that planet.
Totally. And no offense, of course, to anyone who is studying Proxima Centauri. I didn't mean to call it. I'm sure it's one of those answers that everyone just is like, oh, of course, I want to just go to Alpha Centauri. So that was my only apology, was for being a boring person. So
no, I don't think it was a boring answer. And for the second question, we've already talked about the benefits that space can bring to everyone on Earth, technologies and ways of sending aid to people in remote locations. So I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite spin-off technology?
Fair enough. So, and I think it goes along the theme of you have to go new places to learn new things. And I remember I was in an interview for I had a little bit of an interest in cardiac surgery at one point, and I went to an interview there and they were asking about. What do you think is going to be the future of cardiac surgery? And I said, maybe, there's some very interesting biomaterials. Could that be used to make new valves? And then I talked with somebody later, and they said, you kind of performed poorly on your interview, because when you were asked what is the future of cardiac surgery in 10 years, you didn't say LVAD, i.e. the left ventricular assist device. And I thought, what? I thought that was more of a let's be creative question. But what's fascinating is the left ventricular assist device. A huge reason why that was made was by going to space. Was by and you wonder what the the answer to the question before LVAD was really came into fruition of what would the future of cardiac surgery be. And so I think why I like LVAD is it's, again, it's a bit of a personal connection that way, but it is something that's been tremendously useful and saved a lot of lives, but wouldn't have come about had it not been for some really smart people going into a really unique environment and thinking about, okay, well, what might we develop out of this? So yeah, left ventricular assist device.
Yeah, it's incredible that there's so much medical based technology that actually came from space that not people realize. I think my favorite is probably, I know there's the neuro arm that was designed from the Canadarm on the International Space Station, and the other one was the alarms that come from medical equipment that the telecommutative alarms on medical equipment was only designed because they needed NASA had to keep track of the medical conditions of astronauts during training and while in space, and they realized, oh, this is actually quite useful for us. Let's actually give it to hospitals. We'll probably need it 24/7. Yeah. And for the final question, since this is the Diaries of Space Explorers, I wanted to ask you, who is your favorite space explorer?
Sure, Story Musgrave, and I'll give you a bit of a reason for that. I mean, I think what's fascinating. I saw him give a talk at the Aerospace Medical Association conference, and I think what was just really, really fun was he just, when he kind of went through his career, he's got this very multi-domained kind of intelligence that was just fascinating, and you kind of see his presentation was like 300 slides. It was
that's a presentation,
and he was just going through it at a mile a minute, and it was so funny because he was kind of like, he kind of was like, okay, well, I worked in computers for a while, and then I decided that was boring, and then I went into med school, then I went on a space shuttle, then I went back down from the space shuttle, then I had a grandkid, that sort of a thing, and then I taught my grandkid how to ride a tractor or something like that. So it was really fun to kind of see just how he went into one field, kind of mastered that, then went to another field and kind of mastered that, then went to space, and then kind of came back from space, and then went on to kind of lead these other lives. So it's kind of that, sometimes when we look at people who do many different things and maybe can't always have focus, we sometimes see that as a problem. And I mean, there are certain cases where you kind of say, okay, well, clearly if there's times where you can't focus to a degree where you can't get anything done, that can be a problem. But what's also neat is kind of say, okay, well, are there times where this is a real strength? And so that I think for Story Musgrave, it was really fascinating to see did that, but was disciplined at it and kind of, been there, done that, and now I'm going to do this other thing, and now I'm going to do this other thing. And so that was just, that really kind of was inspirational. And I thought, and he's a really friendly guy. And so I'll say Story Musgrave is my favorite space explorer.
Well, I can't imagine going into a lecture or a seminar where I see the total slides is 300. My first thought would be like, oh, this is going to be a long afternoon.
No test, though. I mean, he was very engaging and he was very fast going through it, and it was just entertaining as all heck. So that was really fun.
Yeah, but he sounds like a really good inspirational space explorer. So I'm glad you got to meet him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and, I think one thing that's also fascinating about space, and also getting more people involved in space, and kind of is I think there are times where we think we know something, and then when we go into a new environment and we do new things, we figure out something totally different. And there was one really fascinating talk at the NASA Human Research Program last year about a group called the Gallaudet 11, and these were folks who were deaf and often had some troubles with sensory perception and that sort of a thing, with regards to vestibular motion and all that sort of thing. And so, but there was one video they showed that was fascinating, and it showed. Sometimes we kind of say, okay, well, sometimes weaknesses can be strengths, but in this case, it really, really was a strength for them. This thing that other people felt were weaknesses, and it was, they were as part of a training program. They were on a ship near Newfoundland, and everybody else was getting sick on this boat because it was rocking everywhere, and they were having a lot of troubles. And the Gallaudet 11, who all of them were deaf, were just sitting there as if, oh, this is no big deal. And when you look at space, I mean, so many people get space motion sickness. I mean, I've gotten very sick on a parabolic aircraft before and everything. And so, but folks like this, you're like, well, that's not a problem for them. And that's a major strength in an environment where a lot of the rest of us would be, completely incapacitated. And so, I think there is a potential for space to bring out some very interesting things in people that we would ordinarily see as weaknesses, but really, not in the cliche version, but this weakness is provably a strength in this particular setting.
I guess it does provide insight that sub-weaknesses could be a strength in a different field. So I think it's something that everyone should keep in mind. So, Michael, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. It was very incredible to hear your story from the field of life sciences and medicine, and now into space, but still with medicine. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time.
If you would like to learn more about Dr. Michael Gallagher's work and his role in the Association of Spaceflight Professionals, you can go to their website at www.spaceflightprofessionals.org, and you can connect to Michael Gallagher on LinkedIn. I have been your host, Gavin Telemedi, and if you'd like to learn more about the show or have someone you'd like to recommend as a guest, you can email us at thediariesofspaceexplorers@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at Diaries of Space or Instagram at the Diaries of Space Explorers. Thanks for listening, and see you all next time.